Hey, welcome to another edition of What's It Like? I'm your host, Jay Liebenguth. Thank you for taking the time to stop by today. We've got a great show for you and a very interesting guest. Brigitte Timmerman is my guest today, and she is a filmmaker and grew up in a ranching family, which probably is one of the reasons that she did a film called The Sandhills Cowboy. So, Brigitte, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And talk to us a little bit about why are you a filmmaker? Where did that come from?
Well, I lived in Chicago for 13 years. I started more in media when I went to school in Durango, Colorado, where I graduated from Fort Lewis College. And I always had documentaries in the back of my mind. And then life happened, you get a job in marketing and advertising, and it just so happens in my neighborhood there was a filmmakers association. It's a filmmakers co-op called Chicago Filmmakers, and is the best thing, one of the best things that ever happened to me. So I spent about 2 or 3 years taking classes, going through documentary labs, which is a very intensive process when you're learning documentary. A lot of great instructors, and my first instructor was up for an Academy Award and won an Emmy for The Trials of Muhammad Ali. So I had some really great people to work with. And then, you obviously, if you're going to do these classes, you should do a documentary.
Yeah. I
worked on something on Pine Ridge, and eventually I started getting into work on my own, which was Sandhills Cowboy, and then I worked on I'm completing another film about the last fluent speakers of the Omaha tribe.
Oh, that's fascinating. I mean, so to set the scene, that you come from a ranching background, and
Yes.
that ranch kind of bordered the Pine Ridge Reservation.
Yes. My father's first ranch, it was in '74. It was a pretty turbulent time on Pine Ridge. It was right after the Wounded Knee incident.
Yeah.
He ended up buying this ranch, and so I've been going out there, since I can remember. So it's a great life. I grew up with horses and cattle and animals, and we based
Wide open spaces.
Wide open spaces. We were based here in Springfield, but we were constantly going up to the ranch, and I still do to this day. In fact, I took one of the people that was in my documentary for the Omaha Speaking. She's she won't let me tell her age, but she wants to see a cattle drive before she died. So I took her and her daughter, and it was fabulous. So we got to experience a cattle drive, and it was very picturesque, something out of like a painting. So
Yeah.
she got to experience.
Well, it
that.
is a different, I know anybody who's in Omaha and that hasn't had a chance to get out to greater Nebraska, really misses just how wide open it is out there.
It is.
It really is a lot of sky, there's a lot of land, it's flat, there's a lot of beauty in its simplicity.
Yes.
Is that something that you were able to capture, or was part of what you wanted to capture?
Yes, definitely. I tell people, Sandhills in Nebraska, it covers a large amount of our state. It is probably the best kept secret, and people who go out there, I don't know how to describe it, but there is like a renewing energy there. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly peaceful, incredibly tranquil. And I know the film that I did in Cody, this was on my father's ranch in Cody, people who live there don't want to leave. And I see why. It's just the landscape's incredible, and it's just, it's a very subtle type of, I don't know how to describe if it's just a very unique part of our state. And it's just got this, like I said, it's got an amazing energy and peacefulness to it.
I don't think it's for everybody. I don't know how you could describe it to somebody who grew up in a city, for example. And I grew up in St. Louis, so I know what hustle and bustle is like, and I always thought that was something that I would want to keep in my life. But after traveling to Sandhills and hearing the wind blow, and it's almost as if it's hard not to wax philosophic or even poetic to describe that level of quiet that you can hear out there, and that probably it causes them to live a different life. Were you able to capture that, or?
One thing that growing up, you wake up with the meadowlarks every day. Now they're not so much, but in the spring, it's just an incredible sound. I ending my film with the meadowlarks, and I said, I want the horses and the meadowlarks at the end. Yeah, it is. It's incredibly peaceful. I mean, we've had people from New York. We actually had people from New York and to come in to see the eclipse, and they love it out there. And they say the same thing. It's so peaceful out here, and just open and quiet. And so I have brought friends from the city, and they, after living in Chicago, and friends from New York, and they absolutely, they love it. I mean, it's so different, and it's so quiet.
Specifically, you tried to focus on cowboys?
This one, the reason why it's a short film, it's about 16 minutes and 40 seconds. It was my father's idea, and he said, I'm really, the whole rodeo thing has been done, the buckaroo, busting, breaking horses, and that wild stuff has been done.
Horse whisperer.
Well, no, horse whisperer is great, but this is more, there's some really good ones about breaking horses and stuff. But he's like, they don't really talk about the traditional cowboy, the guys that have lived there for a long time and do things traditionally and really live that life and really, communicate to a general audience of what it's like. It just so happens Marty, who's a great cowboy, and he's also a poet, so he's very well spoken. His poetry is fantastic. So I just got really lucky. And it really describes the cowboy life living in the Sandhills, and it's really pretty far removed from even people in Omaha, and it's like a 5-hour drive. Right. So it is a whole different culture, and I ended up, I'm just starting to send it to film festivals, but it ended up getting into a film festival in Bucharest. And so I think the Europeans like the Americana traditional cowboy. A lot of times, too, what I've been seeing, and I'm not saying that it's good or bad, but they're ATVs. You see a lot of people now rounding up their cattle with ATVs. My father and his ranch and the ranches, he keeps it very traditional, and we still always use horses to round up cattle for different reasons, but we feel it keeps them calmer.
I would think so.
Keep that.
Yeah.
You don't want to, make tracks in the Sandhills. So that is still done. I'm old enough to remember when we were haying with a bale, with a big stacker with our team of horses, and I was so glad I got to see that. And that was probably in the mid 70s, maybe early 80s. So, and then, we've many cattle drives, and rather than shipping them around like a pass, we end up just hiring crews. My father ends up hiring crews and then shipping or taking them through the foothills or what have you. So it's a great life, and I wanted to show people that. And interesting enough, the people from larger cities really. Yeah. Really, it resonated well with them. So,
is it a romantic movie or is it a historic movie?
I think it's a very moving movie. I think it's very educational. Romantic. I think you could hit on the romance of the West and the romance of the cowboy way of life. I mean, Marty he speaks so eloquently. There is one poem that. It's at the end of the film, and he really nails on why it's called "Why the Cowboy Rides," and it's just incredibly moving, and I would say that's more of a moving film, and it educates you on what cowboys do out there.
Yeah. I mean, it's not as romantic of a life as it is. It's still a hard life.
Of course.
There's the time in the saddle alone has got to be aching on your old bones. I mean, there are stubborn animals out there. There's still danger in wild and a horse stepping in a hole. I mean, there's lots of things that can go wrong, but it's still a way of life.
Sure. I mean, my father's 77, and he still works cattle all the time. He's always sorting cattle. And Marty, I don't know if Marty wants need to tell him his age. He's in his 60s, maybe early 60s. He talks about that, and that's another thing in the film, and I don't know if I'm giving too much away, but he talks at communion with your horse.
Yeah.
You commune with this animal, and that's your partner for the day. You go out and you're riding hours all day in the wind, rain, snow, and then you make that commune back. So it's a really beautiful way to tell how you're working with your animal.
And nobody talks about communing with an ATV.
No. Probably.
And the dependence is a lot different than.
Exactly. And he also talks about, at the beginning of the poem, it's like, why do you do what you do when there's so many other things that could make you a better living? And he said, I think they're wrong because I don't understand. And he goes into that poetic dialogue, and it really is a beautiful, beautiful way to describe it. And so
as a business model, I know your dad is still a rancher. Mm-hmm. As a business model, is still this the way to do it? Hiring cowboys?
Yes, of course. Yes. It's eco-friendly. You need someone who really, and it's getting harder. You need to hire really good cowboys who understand cattle. A machine can't do it. They can't go out and see if or their horses. There's places where ATVs can't go that horses can go. Right. I think it's that instinctual skill that you only have when you've done this for so many years. And these guys that have worked for my father, and it's cool because it's a partnership between the men that he hires. And it's very traditional. So if there's a gal that works cattle, and she's awesome too. But you see that partnership between the ranch manager and their wives, they work in partnership together, and you see that a lot. And it's a very positive. You see that as a very positive relationship structure. Now, if there was a woman that did it and the husband would stay home, it's still pretty traditional.
Still
out
pretty
there.
traditional,
yeah. But it works, and it's very, you see a lot of good relationships out there because they work together.
I think about the human resources management of that function of the ranch manager, and that probably is a lot more simple and straightforward than we see in traditional businesses.
It is, and very family oriented. But it's still, getting cowboys out there, hiring really good cowboys. I mean, it is a dying breed, and good horsemen. I mean,
I wonder where they're going to come from in the future. Are there sons that are?
I have nephews. Yes, I have nephews.
But are there sons that are picking up that cowboy role that will want to spend their lives in the saddle?
I think the best example I've seen of a bunch of children. I went to this community event called Circle C Days in Cody, and it was really amazing. All these kids. First of all, you've never seen a sedentary kid. You saw them; they were all in their cowboy hats, and they were all engaged.
Moving around.
Nobody
twirling a rope.
Yeah. Nobody was on their phones, on their horse. You see these kids very engaged, and I was talking to them, and a lot of these kids' fathers are ranchers, and from ranching families. So you see that generation. That reminded me of what the Sarpy County Fair was 30 years ago when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. And now I see where I grew up. I went to I went to high school, and I went to school in Gretna, and now it's become a suburb. So I've seen that change. There, you hope it's so far removed from everything else. You really, really hope that will be continued. Because it really is, it's a really, the solitude, it's not that, but there's also community, and you see these people that live on ranches that are probably, 20 miles from the next neighbor, but they get together, and it's a great community that you see.
Yeah.
So,
Let me, before we start talking about your other film, I want to just take a couple seconds here to talk about the business part of it. Mm-hmm. How long did you work on it, and how long did it take?
This film was actually, I shot it over 3 days, and I was night and day. I shot it coming in the morning. I shot Circle C Days, which was that event I told you about. And then all day long, I got up at 4:30, shooting sunrises, sunsets, all day long, and then logging and going through my footage. I had this done fairly quickly in about a month.
Including editing?
Including editing.
Wow.
I have a fabulous editor. But I also grew up there, and my father and I had an idea of what we wanted to what we grew up there, so we know like what the rhythm was going to be and how it was going to be.
So you probably didn't have a whole lot of big funding behind you on
No.
this one.
No, not.
You shot it yourself.
Yes.
You were involved in the post-production, except for the editing. So, yeah, pretty quick.
Pretty quick, but still is. There's the funding. Editors are not cheap. A good editor is not cheap.
Yeah.
But then the funding comes into when you take it to
a festival.
To a festival.
Yeah.
So
'Cause you got to do a print and.
Sure. And then you pay like a lot. I submitted it to Sundance. Crossed my fingers. Very competitive. It would be wonderful. I got in, but you're paying like between $20 to $90 to get into festivals. And that I can't remember how many.
And that's whether you get in or not. That's just a submission fee.
That's just a submission fee.
Right.
Then if they accept you, then you fly to that, if it's a big enough festival, if you think you might get a distribution deal, then you fly and you go to that festival. So that's a lot.
Pay for your expenses.
Pay
and
for
hotels
everything.
That are blasted out because there's a big, contingent that goes there, so
Absolutely.
everything is priced differently.
Yes.
Okay, so the Omaha Speaking, how did this movie start to gel in your mind? Where did that story come from?
Well, that actually was a lot longer project. I've been working on that for 2 years. What happened was it was a Omaha tribal member. I was working on a project on Pine Ridge, and that ended, and I was a little burnt out, so I wanted to take a break. And he kept telling me, I have a project for you. And I said, I just want to, I want to relax right now. And he said, no, you have to do it now because there's a crisis in our community that there's only approximately 12 fluent speakers left in the tribe.
Wow.
And you can't say no to that.
No.
And he said, you're the only one I know that knows how to film, in the community. So I started right away. And these three ladies are from, the one on the left is the oldest, on my left is the oldest member of the tribe. I was really fortunate to have elders guide me and help me, and I have an elder with me on every interview because I know it's culturally sensitive, and I'm an outsider.
Sure.
So you have to do it the right way. You have to come in very courteous, and there's some certain things you have to know that they'll tell you that's culturally appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So it took a while. They don't, some people just they don't know me, so they're going to maybe keep it at arm distance, and slowly, since they got to know me, I did get most of the fluent speakers that they know of. There's probably some more out there that no one knows. They want to keep it quiet, but I did get quite a few of them, approximately 12 on camera, and a lot of them speaking Omaha. And I would say the age range is from 63 to 94.
Wow.
So that's it. And also, this is the last generation that speaks it in the home. That was their first language in the home. Mm-hmm. So that is why it's very important to honor these elders and make sure that we have on film, or that they want on film, what they want to say and what they want to leave for future generations.
I find it interesting that I think probably a lot of people in Omaha don't recognize that it's a Native American name, that it came from a tribe. Where approximately are they from here?
They're approximately 70 miles north of Omaha,
Okay.
the Omaha Reservation. So that's roughly, it's just north of Blair, if you
Okay.
take 75 north. There are some in western Iowa and parts in Omaha, but predominantly the Omaha people are in are in the Macy, Pender, Walt Hill, Rosalie area.
Okay, all right.
And relatively small tribe. I mean, it's around roughly, I've heard between 5,000 to 6,000, but
That's
I think
still a
people
fair
think
number.
it's a fair number.
Yeah.
With only, a handful of fluent speakers left.
Yeah, I would think that that's probably, so in terms of the initiation of the project, was that something that was initiated by someone in the tribe? Are they the ones that said that we have to capture this, or was it somebody from the outside?
It was a friend of mine who is who's a member of the Omaha tribe. He's
Okay.
the one that approached me
Okay.
because his father is one of the last fluent speakers, and he said my father has a lot to say, and he did. It was great. I have quite a few interviews with him. He said we need someone to capture these people. They need to be honored, and we need something on film or audio that will capture these what they're saying,
Right.
their original language.
Gotcha. So what have you learned from them? I mean, there's all of that wisdom, there's all of that Native American viewpoint. What have you learned from it so far, and what do you hope to share with the rest of us through this film?
Well, for one, I really respect how the Native Americans honor their elders. Grandmothers are very, very revered. I think this wisdom that they're passing, this is a culture, and this should be respected. I'll be honest, I mean, from my viewpoint, you really realize what it's like. Everyone's going to be that age, and what are you going to leave behind?
Right.
So you really think about, well, what happens when everyone starts aging. I mean, it really kind of resonated with me, but really it is something that I took it over 2 years. And then when it's all done and you're going through the footage and you're like, wow, this is, these people have a lot to share. And so I have some people in the media business that are in the, film business, they will look at my footage from their eyes, because it's a fresh pair of eyes, and they just were really astounded how much was captured. And so I think that's what you learn. You learn that these elders have a lot of value to pass on, and they should. And in fact, I have one story that was really, really touching story. It was a woman that was 87, and they're all very polite, but it's, she didn't know me, so
Sure.
I kept politely asking, but not being, it's not being pushy. It's just, if you don't want to do it, then you back off. But she finally one day she called me back, and I was really surprised. And she said, "Well, I want something to leave my grandchildren before I leave this world." And I said, "Sure." And so I went and interviewed her, and it was a really, really wonderful, heartfelt interview. And after she was done, she said, I'm really glad I did that, and there was a lot of things that I remembered that I forgot, and it brought up a lot of great memories. Well, 3 weeks later, she passed away.
Wow.
And so I immediately, after pretty much every interview, if they want a copy of the interview, I always give it to them. So I gave them a CD. The next day, I gave her a copy of the audio. And then 3 weeks later, I called the family, and I gave my condolences, and they said, "We didn't know that was you. Was that you that had the CD?" I said, "Yes." And she said, they were really thankful, and they said this gave us a lot of comfort. We were listening to it during her, they have 4 days, it's like a 4-day wake, where they honor the person for 4 days after they pass. So she said it was really comforting to listen to that.
I bet.
And so that was very, of course, very rewarding. And so, just what it did for the family, it really was very, very valuable for them.
This sounds like a longer and more involved project than
Yes.
the Sandhills Cowboy.
Yes. 2 years. It's been 2 years.
So far.
So far. Pretty much done filming.
Okay.
We're in the editing process right now. There's a few things we have to film. But I'm hoping, God willing, I would get it done in 3 to 4 months, if after the end of October.
Certainly a longer form than
Yes.
full-length
Definitely.
feature? Or?
Full-length feature for sure.
Okay.
They definitely deserve a full-length feature. very complicated in the editing process. We have 12 people we have to weave into a story. We have to make sure that we get, that's why the elders, like we have a couple native fluent speaking elders that come with me, and we go through the footage and we say, we need to find out which is the most important things to say. Translation, very, very difficult.
Yeah.
There's only 2 people that can help me translate. So that, you know, we have to do that now before that's lost. And so that's what we're doing. And
Do you feel a certain amount of pressure to not only communicate this story, but to really get it right?
yes, absolutely. I tell people all the time, I said, this project scares me. And so a friend of mine who's one of the sons, he said, when's it getting done? And I said, because he saw this film and really liked the cowboy film, and I said, you have no idea, this is incredibly complicated, and we have to make sure we get their voices heard, what they want to say and what they want to leave for future generations, and we have to do it in a way, and that's where an editor comes in that tells you that will be your marriage. That's you're married to that person for that time of that film, where they can really tell that story in an artistic way and still keep the integrity, which are, they're with me all the time. The elders are with me regarding how we're gonna edit this. So yes, it's a lot of responsibility. I try not to think about it. We try to move forward, and now they're starting to get restless. They said, okay, it's been 2 years, so when is it going to get done? And I think it's coming to fruition, so we're really happy about that.
Best of luck to you in finishing this film,
and
all of Godspeed in terms of getting the story to where you needed to be.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for tuning into What's It Like. As your host and producer, I really want to make this show interesting and relevant. And so we need your help. We need your ideas. We need your connections. We need your feedback. Who or what would make a good show? What topics do you feel challenged by? And how could we shed some light on them? Do you know someone interesting that would be a great interview? Well, if you have an answer for any of these, it's easy enough to connect with us. Go to our Facebook page, which is that @ What's It Like to Be, or drop us an email at whatsitlikeshow@gmail.com. Again, thanks for tuning in.